In your tacos.
Yep, tea, no tacos.
And yes, we are live. I'm here with my friend Rizo.
Hey, good
Re-
to talk to you again.
we should call these segments Rizo and what's it called? Rizo and theology. That's it. Rizo and theology, because
Oh, I see the play. I see the play on words.
instead of reason and philosophy, Rizo and philosophy. Or no, Rizo and theology. Is that what the Michael Lofton's channel is called?
Yeah,
Reason and theology. Is that it? Yeah.
that's his
So
channel.
yeah, very nice to see you. I'm a bit dopey today. My head feels like a football. I got like mild headache all day, and so I might not be too sharp. But I'll let you lead the conversation, and I'll see what if the Holy Spirit can move through this sludge that is my brain today. I don't know what it is. I went on a bike trip yesterday with Anna, and it was a nice, beautiful day, but I got a little bit cold and I stuck my feet in freezing cold rapids like water, and so maybe I'm just coming down with something. But enough with the cheap excuses. Let's see what you got to say today.
Well, I think I'm in the same boat. I was up mega late,
Uh,
trying to iron out some online tension. So I was up way too late.
yeah, you were up late sending me LDS Mormons for my podcast. That's what you were doing, right? Probably. It feels like
I
it
was,
'cause I'm getting a lot on them.
I was doing that earlier. Yeah, I invited. I'm in an LDS Facebook group. It's mostly LDS, not entirely, but I think mostly. And so I was like, oh, I should invite them to
Yeah.
go on, see if anyone, because I want to hear their stories just as individuals, and then
Yeah.
also to continue to learn about where they're coming from.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I don't know for sure, but I would guess that probably about 6 or 7 have signed up already to come on my podcast. So that's all thanks to you. So I've been trying for years to get them to come on. Like even here locally, I've got a place of worship for the LDS near like a metro station here, and I've gone in, I've talked to them. They were open and friendly, but it's never happened. So I got the impression that they were very, very shy. And same thing with the Scientologist. I really want to interview a Scientologist, and they also seem very cautious. Maybe they don't want to be challenged, or maybe it's my approach. Like maybe in person, my approach just turns them off. But I've asked many, many Scientologists and Mormons, and they just don't want to come and talk to me.
Well, yeah, I've noticed that too, and I'm only speculating as to like what the reason for that might be. Um, I mean, it's a little bit ironic because like when you think of LDS or Mormons, you think of missionaries who are coming to you, like very, very forthright. So so then I think we, in our heads, or at least in my head, it's like, well, of course they're going to want to like talk about like religious stuff with me. But I mean, that's how I used to think. But now, like over the past couple of years, I've started to get to learn more about them. It used to be that like when I would see them or talk to them, the missionaries, I would just want to engage in like theological judo. And to an extent, like I still have that bent, that's it, I still have that, but I've had a chance to befriend some of them and learn like their mission service for the most part is kind of a requirement. It's not like super like you have to, but it's almost a requirement, or at least strongly encouraged. And so, this is 18, 19-year-old young guys
Mm.
who most of the time they don't really even know their faith super well. There are some exceptions, but they're not. So they go on this mission that they have to do. And you should, when you interview them, you should ask them about their mission. That's an important time of their life. It's kind of like a trial by fire, coming of age. It's, it has many positive things about it. But how familiar with their mission are you?
Well, I did have that one guest. I'm not sure if you sent him to me, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
did. I
Sam.
did have. Yeah, I did have that one guest, and I asked him a little bit. The main takeaway that I got was that he was very bashful and shy, and well, I wasn't the best missionary, and um, there's a standard approach, and I asked him to walk me through it, and he was. I understand perfectly. Like there's that sort of what I call the state dependent memory, where you can't just flip into that mode. And even to this day, like if I'm not in prayer mode, I find it hard to recite my prayers, my memorized prayers, because there is a certain mood, a certain state that you get into when you're in a certain context. And I'm sure that holds for professional sports and other things too. I'm always amazed with professional athletes, how they get through like a 1 hour or 2 hour event, or even a half-hour event, and they could just like walk you through what they did, what the opposing team did, whatever. It's just like amazing. So yeah, some people are able to connect very well with their memories, and the short-term memory, mid-term memory, and long-term memory. Uh, it's never been a strength of mine. It's always been a weakness of mine. So I understand that he struggled to sort of walk me through the missionary thing, but my takeaway really was that he was kind of uncomfortable when he had to go out and do that, and he felt like he had a lot of growing to do, and he was still young, and so I appreciate that honesty and that humility, and it's good.
Well, and yeah, and I consider him a friend. I found as I was trying to explore Mormonism that speaking with the missionaries wasn't the best route to really
Mm.
learn what I wanted to know.
Are they
Um,
older? The people you sent me, like the 4 or 5 people you sent me, are they older?
yeah, these are older,
Okay.
and it's a group of LDS church members who are more willing to kind of engage with stuff.
Okay. Okay.
I think a lot of them, like they go on their mission. You had to go on their mission. You're kind of required to go door to door, and you meet with like a lot of hostile
Mm,
religious Christian
mm.
people who are more interested in like uh theological judo than like you as a person, and
Yeah.
they don't always show, myself included, don't always really show like a Christ-like love towards you.
Yeah.
And so then that's their experience. I think that when you're done with your 2-year mission, that might be the last thing on the world,
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Traumatizing, in other words, a little bit traumatizing, perhaps.
Right. But Sam, I think Sam, he had his own difficulties with his mission. I saw that a little bit in the interview, but we met online through like a theological debate group,
Uh,
and he he was the missionary who actually taught me the most about Mormonism.
oh.
So he would just give me, like I could get the background, honest answer and
Mhm.
scoops from him. And I actually had him teach me through I can't remember how many lessons they had. I think it may have been 5 or
Yeah.
6. But I asked him, would you teach me through the standard lessons that you're supposed to go through? Because I knew I could ask him questions, and he would give me he would give me a more informed and straight answer than I would normally get.
I'm saying hello to my friend Nicola Krisick.
Oh, hey, Nicola.
He's anxious for you to talk about what church is. I think he knows by now that's the sort of the theme that you run with. And
Okay.
we planned this, I don't know how many weeks ago now,
Yeah,
you and I to do this. And there was an idea about why we were going to talk about something in particular in relation to church. Maybe you remember, I don't.
I
And
do.
and then more recently, we said, hey, we could discuss this when we talk next. That was a topic that had to do with fraternal
Okay.
correction. Fraternal correction. Okay,
Great. Yeah.
fraternal
Yeah.
correction. When to criticize the Pope, how to criticize the Pope, who's doing a good job, who's doing a bad job. So I remember the second thing that we were going to add on to this talk, but I don't remember the aspect of church that you wanted to talk about. Is it authority or?
Yeah, I think you were gonna make your sales pitch for authority. Like, because I think I think that's what, just pretend you're a missionary at my doorstep, a Catholic missionary.
Yeah.
You
Ding
give me the
dong. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's before I go into missionary mode, um, there's an Orthodox guy, really famous, really, I think he's quirky. I don't know him very well, but from what I've seen, he's a little bit quirky. His name's Seraphin Hamilton.
Yeah, I'm
Seraphin
familiar with
Hamilton.
him.
Okay. he just agreed to come on my show, and I'm excited. You know, my Orthodox friend Kieran Lisney prompted me to ask him. I asked him last year, and he said, "Yeah, sure," but he never got around to it. And then my friend Kieran said, "Whatever happened?" And I re-asked Sarah from Hamilton just the other day, and he said yes, and he booked it. So he's going to come on. And the reason this is relevant is because he belongs to the Orthodox Church. He defends the Orthodox faith and perspective, and I have no clue about authority in the Orthodox Church, how that works. I'm really, really interested. Do they make the claims that the Catholic Church makes, but apply those claims in different ways because they don't have a pope? I'm really, really curious to dig into that with him. But all of this to say that I don't know about the Orthodox. I'm not sure, but hopefully I'm going to find out. But when it comes to the Protestants, I know with certainty that um, the only claims that are made in terms of inerrancy or an infallibility with reference to the Bible, right? Unless you
Well,
go to a sect that would have a Joseph Smith or something like that.
right, exactly. Yep.
Like I interviewed a guy, Tice, and he spoke with God and got the revealed canon. It was 5 books, only 5 books in his canon, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I mean, you can meet what I would call a whack job who thinks they're just deluded, but they think that they've met with God and they got the canon, they got these authoritative teachings, and they know with certainty. Turns out Tice changed his canon later. Like he was certain that it was revealed by God and this is it, it's infallible, and then he changed his canon. So, you know, that just by way of introduction to authority and the church, I mean, that example of Tice, nice guy, nice guy. I'm not putting him down, but he's very, very wrong, and he's deluded about his inspiration. But you know, that example I think is very telling when it comes to looking at any non-Catholic Christian. Now, again, with the proviso that the Orthodox may have some sort of claim to an infallible church. I think they have some sort of sensus fidelium, the sense of the faithful, where if all the Christians believe something, then it's infallibly true. They may have some version of that. We have that in the Catholic Church, but it's a multi-pronged infallibility that we have in the Catholic Church, right? We have a pope who has a charism of infallibility. We have the bishops who work together always with the pope and under the pope who have you know, the charism of infallibility in certain circumstances, and we also have the faithful, the people all together. So you know, I think that you participate in that because you're Christian. To the extent that you're Christian, you participate in that sensus fidelium. You can say infallible truths passively, like you can pass them on. You can tell a Mormon about the one true God and the Trinity and the Incarnation, and you are using the charism of passive infallibility as a member of the body of Christ. So, you know, you participate, the Orthodox participate, and I participate, I would say, in different relationships to Christ and his church. So that's sort of my vision about where I stand on authority and where you stand in relation to the church when it comes to infallibility. Does that make sense?
I think I follow.
So someone like Tice has really removed himself really, really far from the body of Christ, I would say, by declaring his own canon and all these sorts of things. And God love him. He's on a journey. Hopefully he'll come back closer. But you can acknowledge that he's strayed pretty far from what any sort of conservative Christian idea of church is, right?
Well, I think one thing I think in listening to Catholics and Orthodox, and it's not just Catholic and Orthodox, but I think they make a good point in that our faith shouldn't be just an individual.
Yeah.
I figure it out on my own, and I'm just going to totally rely and rest on that. It is valuable to have input from God's people on earth, the church. So anytime, I think anytime I do that or I see other people doing that, I think that is that's a risky move. It's not a strong move.
Yeah. My snappy answer to stupid questions, as Mad Magazine said so many years ago, my snappy answer to stupid questions is always, what does the church teach? So if there's some, like if there are people trying to come at me about some, they have got some position on Mary or morality or anything. If they come at me with anything, I could just turn around and say, well, you're Christian, right? Yeah, okay. Well, what does the church teach? And the people who don't really understand what church is, no offense to you because you're struggling with what church is, but people don't really understand what church is. They're nonplussed. They're nonplussed because they don't know what the church teaches because they don't know what the church is. So I know what the church is. The church is a mystery. The church is beyond my comprehension, and it's supernatural, and it's it's beyond reason. It can't be grasped with the reason. It's a mystery. So I can encounter the church, I can apprehend the church, I can enter the church, I can be a member of the church while maintaining a sense of awe and wonder and mystery and a childlike innocence with respect to that same church, just as you can with God. Especially in this, we could use the idea of the God man Jesus Christ because he's fully God, fully man, just like the church. The church is divine and human. And so we can encounter, there were people who encountered Jesus. They ate with him, they talked with him, and interacted with him. And they appreciated him, and they knew about him, and they gained wisdom and knowledge from him, and they were healed by him. And yet he remained a mystery to them, profoundly, to such an extent that one of the uh, apostles betrayed him. I mean, if that doesn't show that there's not a complete comprehension, then nothing will, right? We don't have a comprehension of God. We just have an apprehension, and we have a freedom. We do have a God-given free will, which is in and of itself a mystery, and we can use that freedom or abuse it. And when we use it, we get closer to God, and when we abuse it, we get further away from God. So it's the same thing with church. That's what I'm coming around to here. We can use our free will and get closer to church, or we can abuse our free will and get further away from church.
Yeah, I follow that. I don't know, like, I wouldn't say I'm 100% settled on what my view of church is, but I wouldn't say that I'm really struggling with it. Like, I feel mostly settled.
Yeah, it's the people of
Um,
God. This is what Vatican II said. It's the people of God, right? And it's the body of Christ. And you've got. I think you've got
yeah,
the main. I think you've got the main bullet points about what the church is,
yeah,
right?
and the leadership too. I
Okay.
don't believe in some sort of. I don't believe in. I think there's a valid place for leadership and authority in the church.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to just before we
yeah,
get into a more conversational approach to this, I just wanted to ask you like what impression you got from me in some of the, because when we speak face to face, it's one thing, but when
yeah,
we would interact like on the internet, on Twitter or wherever else we've interacted in the comment section or whatever, you don't necessarily get the same impression that was intended. So I'm just wondering, with some of the blunt and frankly sometimes just sort of tongue-in-cheek things that I would say, if you felt well, how you felt about it, because I'm not shy to admit that I do embrace triumphalism. I'm very, very proud of Christ and his church, and to be a part of that church and to have the grace to have entered into the church. Now, I'm not proud of my sinfulness and the way that I abuse that invitation into the church and how unworthy I am. I'm not proud of that, but I am proud to be Catholic, to be a member of the church in good standing, hopefully in the state of grace, and when I fall out of the state of grace, get back into the state of grace. So, I mean, what I'm basically asking you is like, I admit being a triumphalist, and that can rub people the wrong way, especially when it comes to snappy answers to stupid questions on the internet. I was just wondering psychologically how that impacted you when you interacted with me over this question of authority in the church.
well, I think it's super helpful to know a person. It
Yeah.
lays that foundation. That's,
Yeah.
that's half of the problem with or more than half. That's probably like 90% of the problem with online interactions
Yeah.
is you don't know the person,
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you have that disagreement, it's hard to know where that's coming from. So, having interacted with you, it doesn't, I'm not
Phase you.
bothered at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No,
That's good.
no. And also, again, like I'm, I'm comfortable with where I'm at.
Yeah.
And if I became convinced of another position, the Catholic position, the Mormon position, the Orthodox position, like I would join up tomorrow.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. 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 For
so
sure.
I'm not, I don't, so I'm not too stressed about it.
Yeah. 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 I'm just no, but I'm not. I know you're not stressed about it. I'm just wondering more about the well, how should I say it? The attractiveness. Like, I mean, is probably not like drawing you in, right? To have, be hammered over the head with a blunt and bold sort of expression of triumphalism.
Well,
Might push
yeah,
you
I haven't,
away.
yeah, I haven't gotten that from you.
Okay.
There have been some other interactions online
Uh-huh.
with Catholics
Uh-huh.
that I've had to draw back from.
Yeah.
If you're someone that goes searching for answers, and it's not just Catholics, it could be Catholic, it could be Calvinist, it could be Mormon, wherever. If you're someone, that goes searching for answers and trying to understand a thing, you might end up in their apologetics world.
Yeah.
But much of apologetics actually isn't aimed for outsiders. It's aimed for the people that are already faithful and believe, to give them enough of an answer to keep, to have, to feel like they have weapons to fight their belief. And sometimes, when I've come into the Catholic apologetics world, it's been a really hostile reception if I give any sort of Protestant pushback. So I've been blocked in comments, in some, there are times online where I've said a comment I shouldn't have said, but yeah, but in these cases, I don't think it was anything inappropriate. It's just, it wasn't really a forum, even though it's a Catholic apologetics thing. If you look at the comments, they're all mostly in agreement, and if someone disagrees, they're shouted down. It's not for people outside the Catholic realm. And so I've had those interactions with some Catholics online that I realized I had to step back from that and just talk with regular Catholics because it was making me kind of hate Catholicism.
Uh, I
But
want
not
to
you.
I want to give a shout out to my friends in the chat. Of course, has already said hi to Nicola. There's my friend Daniel Drazinovich. His brother was actually supposed to come on today, and we had some technical problems, but his brother George was going to come on. Hopefully, he'll reschedule. Hello, Daniel. Nice to see
I
you as
didn't.
always. And my friend Hallie, I always mess up her name. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Haley, Hallie.
Is that her real name? No,
No,
the
I
Luya
don't
part.
think so. I don't think so. I think it's a
She should
yeah.
come on.
You want her to hop on the call right now? I'll give her the
No.
link. I'll send her the link.
She should come on for her own episode.
I
Yeah.
know I've been bugging her, and she keeps saying that yeah, she will eventually, and whatever. But she's everywhere. But I think she saw you get blocked somewhere. I think that's what I'm noticing in the live chat here.
Yeah, I purposely didn't mention where.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So her real name is Hallie. Do you pronounce it Hallie or Haley? Hallie? Anyway, I won't get sidetracked with the live chat here. But like I said, if you're just joining us, my head's like a football, and I feel like I've got some kind of fever or something. So if I'm not too bright, if I'm more dull than usual, you know why. So yeah, the reason I'm asking you about my approach, and in the written form, it could be taken the wrong way, and you don't know when I'm joking, winking, or when I'm serious or whatever. The reason I'm asking that is because, I talked to a controversial Catholic recently, Father James Martin, and he told me before going live that there were certain questions I cannot ask him. Well, he said you can ask, but I can't answer. I'm not going to answer. And so he laid the groundwork for sort of like the safe zone, safe space for him, because he's a public
Yeah.
figure and controversial figure. And so then we just had a chat about Catholic stuff, and it was great. Okay. So I'm wondering with him whether he's a good guy or a bad guy, God alone knows the heart. I'm not worried about that. Okay. But I mean, I'm just thinking about practically when you interact with people about religion. When I think about him, when I think about Pope Francis and the way that Pope Francis interacts with people as individuals, as groups, and worldwide. Um, yes, it rubs people the wrong way. Yes, there are conspiracy theories. Yes, there are fanboys like me, um, and everything in between. But it's a choice. It's a choice that's made. Well, that's a question, right? Is it a choice that's made, a deliberate strategy and tactics and strategy, or is it just the particular personality of certain people, or is it the Jesuit order because they're both Jesuits? Or even if you think about politicians, it's a different game altogether. But some politicians have a certain strategy, certain tactic, and certain things they will always talk about, some things they won't talk about. And I'm wondering how much of that is personality and just character, and how much of it is ego, and how much is self-defense, defense mechanism, and we can attribute it to different psychological factors, and how much of it is planned and orchestrated. And if you look at any YouTuber that's talking about politics or religion, you can pretty quickly come up with like which side of the aisle they're on, left, right, or what their agenda is or whatever. But I'm just wondering how much of that is done consciously. What do you think?
How much of what is done conscious?
The
Like their
posturing and
approach?
the yeah, like I told you with Father James Martin, he said I'm
Yep.
not going to talk about this and that.
Yep.
So it seems like
Um,
a conscious sort of tactical or strategic thing
yeah.
that's done self-consciously, right?
Yeah. I tend to, I don't discount my intuitions. Um, I think there's something to be said for giving people the benefit of the doubt, but that also I think has to be balanced with being, I'm a
Ah,
father.
ah,
So, I'm a father. So, like, it's part of my job to recognize BS and call it out. Like if my kid's like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. It's like, what I'm talking about. So like, I think we have both senses.
ah,
And I think when people are trying to be kind of covert about things,
ah,
like I've already seen it in the Protestant world.
ah,
Like many of the
ah,
things that are happening in the Catholic world happened in the Protestant
ah,
world,
ah,
like,
yeah,
years ago.
ah.
And the covertness,
It's a red flag.
for me, 100%.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like if you want to change, like you can go and find people saying this openly and honestly
yeah,
in different spheres. If you want to change an organization from within,
yeah,
then that's the tightrope you have to walk.
yeah,
You disagree with them profoundly,
yeah.
but you have to know where you can't express outside of those bounds, and you don't express outside of those bounds, and you get right up against the edge, and then you work against whatever the organization's doing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I mean, now we're in some sort of you know, there's some overlap between our main topic of conversation, which is the church and authority, and how I personally will talk about my position, which I'm not being covert about. I'm very explicit with my position, which is I think that there's one church, it's the Catholic Church, and there's no salvation possible outside of the Catholic Church. It's like, bam, that's the clarity. And then the charity part is everyone's welcome, and everyone that doesn't go to hell is gonna find their way into the Catholic Church, right? Like that's the good news. That's the good news that Christ brought. So I'm not hiding any agenda. I don't have any. Everyone knows that I can't keep a secret, and I'm not very good at, being diplomatic or tactful. So, um, but I've completely forgot my train of thought here. But anyway, when it comes to Father James Martin, what I'm wondering, I want your feedback on is, do I look like a complete fool because, not that I care, but just wondering, because I've got my head in the sand and I've got rose-colored Pollyanna glasses and I want to give maximum benefit of the doubt to the Pope and anyone who seems to be close to the Pope, like for example, Father James Martin. Is that one of the dangers of like hoping against hope?
Well, I mean, I think leaving it in God's hands is the best place. So
Yeah.
whether you have the right tack on it, or Taylor Marshall has the right tack on it, or like,
Or somewhere in between. Somewhere in
but
between.
either way, like I think it's good to leave that in God's hands, ultimately. Um, and I do understand your perspective. Um, it's like in the conservative world, there's a lot of bad mouthing of a Democrat president in the Christian world, conservative Christian
Ah,
world.
ah,
And I'm not a fan of that. I do think that there are levels of respect that need to be shown for people that are in authority over you, you know, whether that's your pastor or your pope or your bishop or whoever. Um, I do think that that's reasonable. Um, I do think there's also a place for just speaking clearly and boldly about where there's error. Is that my role? Is that your role? I don't know, like, how to answer that question. Um,
yeah. I just want to throw it out there that yesterday I did a quick episode in the morning about my upcoming guest, and one of my upcoming guests is a woman who's pushing for women's ordination in the Catholic Church. Like she's very open about it, and I respect that. Like you were saying in response to Father James Martin, like that's it's another way that we can go about trying to change the church, right? Like you have your idea, you're wrong, but you have this idea, and you're trying to like make the change and protest, have your big sign and make a parade and try to change the church because you think that it's true and you think this is the right idea that you're fighting for, right?
yeah,
I think she's wrong. I think everyone knows she's wrong, and but I encourage her to follow her heart and follow her conscience. I think she has to also humble herself and educate her conscience, right? But I'm not God, and I'm not here to correct everyone's little errors, right? So I love her, I respect her. When I meet her, she's an older lady too, so I have to respect my elders. So when I meet her, I'm just gonna like let her know very clearly, like I disagree about women's ordination, right? But tell me your pitch and let the audience hear your pitch. And you got a platform here. And this is another thing about the internet and the the blogosphere and podcasting and whatever. A lot of people say, "Well, I'm not going to give this person a platform because they're racist, sexist, homophobe, whatever." I don't subscribe to that. I think give them a platform. Let them air their dirty laundry and let cooler heads prevail.
yeah,
Now, does that mean that I'm just gonna let, a bunch of Nazis come on and deny the Holocaust every episode? No, like I mean it's like you've had your say, I had you on, I listened to you, whatever, I got other guests. I'm not gonna let them take over my channel. But I don't have a problem if someone wants to deny the Holocaust. I don't have a problem with that. I'll let them on and I'll talk to them, and I might even like them, might even become best friends with them, whatever. Same thing with the racist of any other kind. But so I'll just let you respond to that because I can't remember. Once again, I can't remember where I was going with all this.
well, have you seen any of the work or the documentary about Daryl Davis?
No,
uh he's an you should definitely check it out.
Daryl Davis.
It's right on those wavelengths. He's an African American, I think, musician, older guy,
Okay.
and he befriended tons of KKK members.
I may have seen snippets of that. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
just that approach of, he never like compromised or watered things
uh,
down, but he did treat them like a real person.
uh,
It's not like, and I think that's an important thing. I think it's easy for us to say someone disagrees with us theologically, they're in a different church, they're in a different political party, and it's easy for like our minds to slip into the thing where they're no longer a person to us. um you know
Dehumanization, demonization, and dehumanization.
yeah, and then it gives us a right to treat them however they want because they went against our orthodoxy, or they offended, they made fun of my shirt, or whatever the thing is. We can give ourselves a reason to treat them poorly.
Yeah. Okay. So let's segue just a little bit into the fraternal correction side of things here. Um,
Okay.
what would it take? Like, I mean, I'm just thinking in practical terms here. What would it take for you to privately by email or whatever, or to, hit me up with a phone call or whatever, to take me aside and say, David, I love you, and I have to just correct you on this because we're both Christian and blah blah blah. It's my obligation. It's been on my mind. I can't sleep at night. Whatever. What kind of thing? What kinds of things would I have to do for you as a friend who loves me to be bold enough to say, okay, I'm gonna do the fraternal correction? What kinds of things? What are some examples?
Well, I don't like conflict, so I would try and avoid that like the plague.
So it would
So
have
it
to be
does
pretty big. It would have to be pretty big then.
does have to take courage. But I think it also does take love. I think it takes courage. I think it takes love. And I think it takes a relationship. I think too often I try and correct people who I don't have a relationship with. And and I don't know if I need to do that really, but we have a relationship. One way that I think about it is I love my brother dearly. I can't get him to go on your show, but he's one of my closest friends. And so I think about the other person as if they were my brother, you know.
Uh,
And
you've mentioned this
sometimes,
before, yeah.
yeah, sometimes love actually for him would make me speak up sooner, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it might not even be something he did against me, like if I see something that's going to be dangerous for him, like let's say he's driving recklessly even,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah,
doing something in his life, I'd be like, dude, I love you. You need to stop that. Or,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
if it's really bad, like, give him a verbal slapping upside the head.
Yeah, I guess what I'm thinking in the context, specifically in the context of Christian stuff, like, so basically, let's narrow it down to you've got a Christian friend. Maybe it's not, maybe it's someone else. Okay, yeah, you have a relationship with this person, and they're Christian, you're Christian, and they've strayed or they're saying something or doing something that isn't living up to the Christian thing. Like none of us live up to it. So you can't just be constantly pointing out the speck in someone else's eye. So it has to
Sure.
be there has to be a warrant to enter into fraternal correction. But
Yep.
where is that bar? Like where's that line? Where is that line? In terms of Christian
Well,
being a Christian, being a good Christian.
right. In the Gospels, it doesn't it talk about like if someone's done something against you, then you go to them one on one. So then you know that it's an occasion. If it was something against you that you're peeved about, then you have the occasion to go to them and work it out. Um,
Does it
I'm not
say
always.
does it say in the Bible that it has to be specifically pertaining to you? Like they're
I don't know. We could check it out. I thought I remembered that. Like if your brother sins against you,
oh, okay. Okay.
but I don't. I wouldn't. I'm not. I am fallible, so I could be misremembering that.
It's no, you're right. If thy brother shall offend against thee. Wow, so it's very personal. It's very
Yeah.
personal. Okay, I didn't know
Yeah.
that. I didn't know that, but it may have been generalized by the church into it's not that they have offended you. Or maybe we're sensitive enough as Christians that if I see a Christian man raping a Muslim woman, I'll walk up to the Christian man and say, "You're offending me by
Yeah.
your actions." You know what I mean?
Well, there could be a different circumstance, right? Like there's fraternal, that in the word is brothers.
Uh,
So the most of the time the error between brothers is not like, oh, your view of the second coming is wrong. It's more like, hey, you hurt me, you said that thing, you know.
okay.
Um, but there are other types of corrections that are in scripture, right? Where someone is acting a wrong way or teaching a wrong thing, and it's, you see the apostles correcting it. The question is, I think you've kind of asked this, is like, how much for us non-apostles, non-church leaders?
Yeah.
Um,
The bottom of the pyramid.
yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think there is some wisdom in understanding that I might not need to spout off my mouth all the time.
Well, you are on the
But
side of caution anyway, yourself, because you're shy about conflict.
I don't always know. especially online. I mean, I had to apologize to an LDS, a Mormon apologist recently. I did something. I made it. It was valid. It wasn't personal, but it was a criticism that was just out of the blue that I didn't really need to make, and I didn't know him, and so I just apologized for that. Um, I think I do it a lot, but I would be hesitant. I am hesitant of any leadership that does not want to hear correction. That's a red flag for me. If it's like, oh, you're at the bottom, I don't want to hear from you. That's not your role.
Uh,
You know,
uh,
it's
uh,
one if you're at the bottom and you're constantly just pointing out everything and you never look internally and you're just always correcting everyone in charge who's all crazy, that's a problem. But I think also if you're at the top and you're like, I just want to just let us do our job and you just be quiet, that's an issue too.
well, Haley, pronounced Haley, she told me how to
Really.
pronounce her
Okay.
name.
Like
She
the
said,
comment.
yeah, she says some people believe the Earth is flat, and they believe all kinds of things. So this brings to mind an interesting question. Um, I'm a young Earth creationist. I can't remember if you are or not. Remind me.
Um, I am undecided
Okay,
on that.
agnostic. You're agnostic. But
Yeah.
anyway, most people aren't a young Earth creationists. So, like, I mean, uh, because I'm full of pride, I tend to judge them. I think they're idiots. Um, but that's just pride, right? I,
Yeah.
my reason can stand above my pride and say that's not okay. It's a natural reaction that you're having, this judgment, but it's false and you shouldn't put any credence in it. Okay. Um, Same thing when I'm on the highway driving and it's like the people who pass me are a-holes and the people that are in front of me going slow are morons. Like everyone gets categorized as a
Yeah.
loser by me on the highway. Everyone.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, because that's just the way we operate, but we have to have a reason sitting above that and saying, okay, you have these feelings, you think you're special, don't take it too seriously. That's just either it's the voice of demons or it's just the voice of your stupidity, your own stupidity, your frail ego. So when it comes to things like flat Earth or evolution or anything like that, or even the COVID jab or whatever, what things I'm very passionate about and my ego, um, you know, I could be a Karen. I could go around policing everyone and whatever. But like I said, I have because I'm trying to be Christian. I know what the church teaches me to use my reason and have my reason guide my passions. And my reason can even laugh at my passions, how silly and self-indulgent and vain and proud they are, right? So, what say you? You can relate?
Yeah, totally. I live in a smaller town, so I've had the unfortunate circumstance at getting mad at someone in front of me in traffic, and then
Running
realizing that,
into them, run into them at the
well,
store.
realizing that I know them, and then feeling terrible about it.
And you feel ashamed that you weren't living up to your Christian name.
Right. Right.
And your name is Christopher. Wow,
Yeah.
that's a big burden.
Yeah.
So yeah, when it comes to doctrine, when it comes to like the theological checklist, I mean, it would be fun and easy to just go around like making fun of everyone that doesn't have the same list as you. That would just be fun and easy. But I try not to do that. I mean, I do find myself doing that. But
Yeah. Well, and like I said, I've entered a few different apologetics realms outside of my camp, you know, and and one way that I learn is kind of like by grappling with these issues and kind of pushing on them a little bit and
yeah,
asking a lot of questions. And people often take that as a challenge,
yeah,
They
yeah.
take, I ask a lot of questions, and Julie and I had to work this out in our marriage that me asking a question isn't making a statement,
Uh-huh,
like it's a genuine question.
yeah.
So sometimes in asking those questions, they take it as like,
An
some,
attack.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think a lot of particularly like men who are truth seekers and philosophically minded, um, seekers, I guess, seekers. I found it more among men than among women because women are so busy being practical. That's a generalization. Forgive me for overgeneralizing, but that's kind of what I've noticed. And yeah, I've also noticed the same thing about, myself. Like growing up, I very quickly realized that some people take offense at a question. I didn't think that was possible. I didn't think it was possible, but I've had some people point out to me some examples of questions that I would not want to hear. Like, when did you stop beating your wife? It's like um that sort of corners you. That question kind of corners you. Like, well, I stopped on this date. That means they were doing it beforehand, or I haven't stopped. That means they're still doing it. Like, there are kind of like trick questions, right? And I guess we can look to Jesus and the Jews of his day coming up with some trick questions, right? And so, yeah, questions can be weaponized, I guess. I guess we see that in the Bible. You can weaponize questions.
Yeah, definitely.
So we have to, as Christians, we have to avoid the temptation to weaponize questions and then just have the pure uh, motive every time we make a statement or ask a question. Have a pure motive, pure heart, clean heart.
Yeah, that's probably tricky to sort out, because I think a challenging question isn't necessarily a bad thing either. Like there can be a curious question and then there could be a challenging question. And I don't think that's bad,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
That's how we seek. Like it's been interesting the past 6 months. Uh Joe Rogan's been having a bunch of Christian people on his
Oh,
podcast,
oh,
and I've noticed a change in his attitude in how
oh.
he approaches them. Now he's still challenging them and he's asking them probing and challenging questions, but he's also listening to hear the response, and he may not agree, he may say like, well, what convinced you to be a Christian? Why do you believe, whatever Christian thing? And then I noticed that he's listening to hear that response. And he's not a Christian now, so he doesn't agree with those answers at the moment, but it's been interesting to watch.
Yeah, another component of this is honesty. Like, I mean, it ties back in with the red flag of someone who wants to silence questions in a particular area or whatever. Um, but just being forthright and honest about your position. We've touched on this already, but I'm just emphasizing the honesty component of that. Like, um, there's also the Christian notion of discretion. We don't need to tell everyone everything. It's not good. You know what I mean? It's not good to reveal everything.
Yeah.
So I struggle with that because I just sort of like vomit out whatever's on my mind without thinking, and maybe put other people at risk if there are other people connected with the story or whatever. So I'm aware of that. That's a weakness of mine. Um, but I also kind of grew up rebelling against a certain secrecy of like this whole underworld of like the dark secrets of everything, and just I
Yeah,
I I hate
we
that.
don't talk
We
about
don't talk
that.
about that. I hate that.
This thing happened in our family.
Yeah,
We don't talk
exactly.
about
Exactly. I hate that. So I have a rebellion against that, and maybe I've gone too far the other way. But yeah, honesty, and then on the other side, counterbalancing that, a good Christian prudence and discretion.
it. Mhm.
So always, it's never easy. It's never easy, right? Like I can't just pick, let's go this way or let's go that way. Those are the easy ways, right? Like, this way is easy and that way is easy. But what's challenging is being a Christian, where you have to constantly be thrown off balance and try to balance, and then winds are blowing and the tightrope you're walking on is shaking. And
Yeah.
G.K. Chesterton talks a lot about that, how easy it is to fall, and there's only one upright position, there's only one balanced thing, and it's an art. Like, it's an art being a Christian. So it's an adventure, it's an art, and the whole men's movement is drawing on this sort of imagery, like, let's rise to the occasion and let's not be lazy, let's not fall into bad habits, fall into easy stuff, and let's put energy into it and be a man. And this is what virtue means. The vir part of virtue is manliness.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Veer, man,
Yeah.
Virtue. So
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's good stuff. You talked about fraternal correction.
yeah,
I think it's so difficult for us to really practice is because we're not really in a brotherhood, you
yeah.
know.
So this
Um,
comes back to what is church and what is community and all that. So we're tying it back together because that's what I
yeah.
wanted to do. I wanted to come back to the overriding thing, which is the Christian community, the people of God, and the church. So I'll tell you a little anecdote, and then you can give your 2 cents worth on the whole connection between fraternal correction and the fraternity that is supposed to exist. At my church, well, here in Montreal, a lot of parish churches, they get sold, turned into condos, turned into mosques, like, or demolished or whatever. And my parish now is sort of in SOS mode. And my
Hmm.
previous parish, that would before I moved, we had another parish. It was, I think, the second oldest church in all of Montreal. It's in crisis. It may already have been sold.
Hmm.
Um, but my current parish is called Immaculate Conception, and one of the remedies that my priest took, and he helps me. He gives me confession and these sorts of things. So he's a very nice man. Um, one of the remedies we did today was prayer, praying to protect the church, this particular building, and the particular congregation. Because that's one of the definitions of church is this particular brick and mortar thing on the corner that I go to, right? And the people that are another definition is the people that go to that particular brick and mortar thing. There's so many definitions, but we prayed. We stayed after mass and we prayed, and there was a little handout with prayers, and we prayed them, and hopefully everyone was sincerely praying in their heart for the protection of the church and for the church to survive, basically. Um, so we were, for the first time really in my parish, I felt like because we came out of our pews and we sort of congregated together around the front. It was kind of the first time where I felt the awkwardness. I felt like people they're not comfortable really, like they didn't want to mix and match too much, but there's a
Hmm.
tiny bit of warmth and a tiny bit of a feeling like, yeah, we're the congregation here. And that's what I was feeling like. I exchanged glances with this guy next to me, but it was just sort of like we're all so shy and prickly. Like it's just weird. Like in the Catholic Church, it's just weird. I'm shy and prickly anyway, unless I'm doing one-on-one with someone. But I just want to get your feedback on that little that little dose of community that we had injected. So small, so insignificant, and far from what you're envisioning, right?
Yeah, not just envisioning, but that I've experienced. You know, eh, like I think that type of thing, sometimes churches will notice. They'll say, "Hey, like we read in the scriptures about this bond that's like a family bond, or even like within one body kind of bond.
Hmm.
It's a very intimate and connected type of bond." And we don't. I'm not sure we're really connecting that way. And so the leadership will sometimes notice that and try and like, okay, we need to try and force we need to try and force people to like connect with each other. And it does oftentimes end up like really awkward. The worst part of any church service for introverts, myself included, is like when it's like, let's stop and turn and give the peace to someone or greet someone. Like if I could just disappear for that moment, I would be happy to. But and that's just because of I think part of it is like the structure of the thing, and we've talked about this. Like the earliest churches were probably around tables and in living rooms, and in that kind of a circumstance, um I'm comfortable, and it's a situation that allows for, like, we know how to act in that kind of a situation. It's appropriate for us to get to know each other um and like connect in a more familial way. Families live in houses. If I told you I lived at like in a shopping mall, it'd be kind of a weird story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm just thinking, as you were speaking, I was thinking about the Freedom Convoy 2020. two, was it? In February, and a bunch of truckers came from west, and a few came from the east, and they met in Ottawa. But it was the voyage, and it was the it was also the coming together, and the camaraderie, and in spite of very profound and significant philosophical differences, right? Okay, on other issues like religion, a lot of Christians, a lot of different kinds of Christians, a lot of atheists, a lot of different kinds of a lot of political people that maybe have dark motivations. Who knows? But when I think about an organic, grassroots, spontaneous movement of people coming together, and they know what they're jazzed about, they know what they're pumped about, and there's a common thing, and it's so natural. That's how I see the early church. It's like, hey, God came to earth, and He's promised to liberate us and to bring us to the Father, and um, it's like if you heard the good news, it's just like catching on like wildfire, and there's this movement. And yeah, those people in the time of the apostles, they had their own differences too. I mean, they could argue about their favorite sports team or whatever too, like we do. If they had
Yep.
sports teams back, I don't know if they had sports teams back then, but the equivalent to that. Were there chariot races back in the time of the apostles? I don't know.
I don't know.
Wrestlers, I don't know. Anyway, but they had their own differences, probably politically. I'm from a Pharisee background. You're from a Zealot background or a Sadducee background or whatever. There probably were significant differences, right?
Right.
But they were like, "Hey, have you heard the good news?" And it's just like that was the dominant, overwhelming thing. So I'm wondering, having, while I was listening to you, I was thinking about that and the passion and the sort of wave of enthusiasm, which is natural and organic, and spontaneous. And I'm just wondering, like, I don't want to fake that, and I don't want to contrive that, and I don't want to like be a social engineer that's like trying to make church spontaneous. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of has to
Well,
be natural, right?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I've heard that perspective before,
Uh-huh.
but if there are clear directives in the apostolic teaching
Uh-huh.
about how we're supposed to do church,
Uh-huh.
then we don't really have to contrive or come up with anything really that creative. We just do those things, you know. So like like the Eucharist,
Mm.
one beautiful thing, like we think about the communion table, the original communion table,
Yeah.
you know, the central focus is on Jesus,
Yeah.
you know, and that was in a community, like in a communion way, in a community way, not just an individual, let me sit in my pew and think about Jesus, like you were saying, like if there's two of us and we're jazzed about Jesus and what he's done in our life and the Holy Spirit and all of this, and our lives have been turned upside down, it's like I want to walk with you. I want to focus on Jesus together,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And so then there's that picture in at the Eucharist table as well of community and communion. But like I was saying, the scriptures I think just has clear things of, it says to bear one another's burdens,
Mm.
and to pray for each other
Yeah.
and to sing together. And it gives a picture of eating together. Like there's very clear, and to love each other. Like, so it's very simple. It's like, how am I supposed to do that if I don't know the person? I
Yeah.
can do it kind of like generally, but like I can't do it in like a brotherly way. Like we know, like if there's a family member that I'm distant from, I know what to do. It's not like a mystery as to what I need to do. We just agree to hang out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is not the first time we're talking about this, and I'm probably going to run out of original things to say, but I'm going to complain once again, along with you that we don't have that. Like, I mean, I'm tempted to say the old catchphrase, "I'm not being fed." I'm not being fed in that way. I'm not being fed in that way. But
Yeah.
and these are things like I said. I've said these before. I've said these things before, but you know, we always talk about humanity, and we talk about some sort of fake abstract love of humanity and, hatred of your physical neighbor next door. Like that sort of, yeah, it was a pie in the sky theoretical love of humans, the nameless, faceless humans. You know what I mean? Without
Mhm.
being concerned about the burden of your physical neighbors. So yeah, there's an old, well, I don't know how old this saying is, or I think it was maybe one saint who popularized it or came up with it. He said that my hunger, for example, is a material problem, but my neighbor's hunger is a spiritual problem for me. My neighbor's hunger is a spiritual problem for me. So same thing with safety and security and everything else. Like for me, it's just a material problem. But if it's my neighbor, whether he's my friend or my enemy or relative or whatever, it's a spiritual problem. So I often think about this. I often think about this aspect of um, the American dream, the pursuit of happiness, individualism. People want to have a nice shelter, a nice, house, nice car or cars, uh, maybe a boat, whatever. Um, Good food, maybe even homegrown food. Maybe they're self-sufficient. Maybe they're right off the grid with all green, ecological wind turbines and all the latest technology that's green, and they've got a lifetime supply of food and it's fresh and healthy, and their kids are homeschooled and everyone's happy and this and that, the other thing. Like this dream, some people have this dream, and what's missing from the equation is the child who's dying of starvation every 7 seconds worldwide. This is like it's ongoing. Sorry, your dream your dream only helped the 6 or 7 people in your immediate family. Like it's like there's a problem. There's a problem that you can't ignore. You ignore it at your own peril. You know, so I think there's a tendency to sell the American dream where it's like you can be happy, but at what price? Like, I mean, you win the whole world and lose your soul. That's a kind of the extreme warning. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not saying to stop looking after yourself. I'm not saying to stop taking care of your family and striving to get your car repaired or move into a nicer, bigger house or whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, big picture, big picture, there are people that are being enslaved, people are being tortured, people are being discriminated against in bad ways, and that for me, I keep that big picture in mind, and it's one of the things that prevents me from having a dream about just my little off the grid paradise. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? So
Yep.
I'll just let you respond to that.
Well, that's very similar to like some things that my best friend has expressed before, you know, um, that you can have your own dream, but what about that bigger picture? Um, I think if you found the perfect Christian community where everyone was just tight, and we got together and we were focused on Jesus, and we helped encourage each other and prayed for each other regularly. Like, I think if you could snap your fingers and have that, you would have some very miserable times as part of that, because now it's much easier just to be like separated from people, and then I don't have to deal with your junk. I don't have to interact with you, you don't have to hurt me.
Yeah,
you know
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and we don't experience that a lot because we're just not very connected. um,
Well, another thing to throw into the messy pot here
mhm,
is, I watch a lot of, well, not a lot, but I've watched a few documentaries, about cults, religious cults, and stuff like that. And I'm always amazed and I always admire the naive, innocent victims who join the cult and they work like slaves
mhm,
for no pay, you know,
yeah,
and they gave, like the Christians did, they gave all their worldly goods to this church or whatever it was. A lot of them are, Christian based, loosely Christian based cults. But it's like these are nice people. These are really good people, misdirected, misguided, and naive, and silly and foolish, but sweet and giving. And you can imagine that energy that these successful cults have, at least for a short time. Um, that energy. Imagine if that were directed for the good. you know? And so that's basically your vision of what Christianity should be. I think that's your kind of your vision, like where people are making sacrifice, people are on fire, people are giving of themselves, people are connecting, people are, putting up with each other and all warts and all with what comes from that communal life. But if it's done in Christ and with Christ and for Christ, then it doesn't end up being an HBO documentary about this suicide cult. It ends up transforming the world, right?
Well, and obviously it goes off the rails sometimes, but that's no excuse to then just, like, just because something goes off the rails doesn't mean we throw out the whole thing. And I think I don't know lots about them, but there are some older, long-standing communities that are more like that. The Amish, there's a group called the Bruderhof. Like, if you want to join the Bruderhof Christian group, you like sell everything before you go in. And I haven't seen any signs of like really bad stuff, but I don't think everyone has to join some sort of commune.
Yeah.
But I think it is like, if you think of like concentric circles, like at the center is love God, but then very quickly, like Jesus, what's that next circle?
Love
It's
neighbor.
love up,
Yeah.
and then the closest others, it talks about starting with the household of God. So I think too often in the church, too often it's very easy for us to love people further from us, whether it's even like go serve at the local homeless shelter or send some money to Africa. But that's further in the circles. We should definitely do that. But we're called to, as Christians, as part of the church, is my brother in my local gathering is closer on that circle. Like, I need to be connected with him in such a way that I know, like, if he's just like dying on the inside with something, or he's losing at some sort of battle, so that he's not just like alone in that. Maybe he needs correction, maybe he needs encouragement, maybe I need his correction or encouragement. Like, this is all through scripture of this like this very connected family kind of body. So, and that requires, like, it's hard to like just say like we need to force that to happen. Like, how do you force that to happen? You need some sort of structure where you have an agreement. Like, if, let's say, I lived in your city, I'd say like, hey, do you want to follow after Jesus? And you're like, yes, I would. And I'd be like, me too, and I'm so terrible at it. I'm such a failure. What about we go on a walk, once a week, and we chat with each other, pray
Yeah.
for each other. What about there's some other guys that want to be part of that? What starts to happen is like the fraternal Christian body as described in scripture.
What do you think about this whole church planting, church building thing? You know, that's not part of my tradition, but it's probably part of yours or something adjacent to yours. Um, they call it church planting. Is that the word?
Yeah.
So what's the basic idea? You just send people out and they start a church, or what is that?
Yeah. And usually that kind of implies that there is a sending body.
Hmm.
Church planting usually isn't just like one person goes and starts their own thing. It's you have a church body who has a certain way of functioning and doing things. And so then they train and select certain people to go to a new area, or maybe even in the same town, a different group of people, and then start a church. And usually the interesting thing about that is usually early on in that process, it's so small, it has to start in the living room. It starts around the dinner table. It starts as the early church. And you often hear from people that have been part of those church plants of how wonderful the early days were, how close and tightly connected everyone was, and how God was moving in that group. But our conception of church is way different than that. Almost no one has that conception of church. It's the next step is we need a middle school to meet at. Now we're involved with setting up chairs and getting a worship band together. And then we need our own building. So now like it quickly, it moves beyond that, what was happening in that living room, to all kinds of other stuff. And not that the other stuff is bad, but what gets lost is that closeness that happened in the living
I
room.
just had an idea and inspiration. It's not a good one. It's a bad one, but it's a cynical one, a jaded one. But basically, the idea is it's all about young people. It's about young people who are seeking, who are free, who haven't got their rigid walls up, and they're not a bunch of crusty old people set in their ways. This is a powerful idea we need to bring into this conversation, because I'm in a situation which is untenable in terms of like like I can't go back to when I was in my 20s and I was just like floating around, and these spontaneous groups were forming and connections were made, and it's just organic and beautiful. And so it's like I can dream about that. I can like romanticize about how it was and how it would be nice to find yourself in that situation again, you know. Um, but I mean, I just know that I'm settled into this really dry and lonely sort of lifestyle: work, sleep, repeat, whatever. And thank God I have the podcast. I can meet real human beings and talk to them about stuff that I care about. But in my real life, it's not religious conversations. We're not getting inspired and talking about Christ or whatever. It's just not happening. And even if there were some local group here that I was really enthusiastic to join, it's like my hands are kind of tied with my annoying work, which takes up a lot of time and energy, and my wife, who's anti-Catholic. It's like I accept my lot in life, and I take full responsibility for all the bad stuff, because I deserve so much worse, right? So I'm not going to complain to God like, oh, oh, why can't I have a nice whatever? I take full responsibility. I was like, I'm very happy. I'm very grateful to God. Like, He's not punishing me more, right? It's like He's protecting me from all kinds of stuff. So I'm grateful. I'm very happy with my crappy little life, but it is crappy and it is little, right? So can you relate as a man who is no longer in his 20s? How
Um,
old are you?
I am 45.
Okay.
Um, I think the church stuff is clear enough. The teachings are clear enough in the apostolic deposit of faith, and I've had enough positive experiences with it that confirm that. That I think, and to be honest, it is super difficult. So I sympathize with you, like trying to locate that in a world that, for the most part, in a religious world that doesn't see it that way, is very difficult. It's like, what am I supposed to start this entire thing? And like these past few years, like we've kind of given up on it in a lot of senses in our family. But I don't feel the freedom to be able to give up on it. I don't see it as an optional part of the Christian life unless God like sends me out to the desert, you know.
Uh-huh.
Um, so like I am called to be in fellowship with my brothers and sisters, like in, what is it, in Hebrews, where the author of Hebrews says, you know, don't give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. And so that was always quoted as like the proof text to, you need to go to church on Sunday. See, it says it in Hebrews. But what people wouldn't do is keep quoting what's in Hebrews, which it talks about why we're meeting together. And I don't have the rest of it memorized, but it talks about like the purpose of that is to encourage each other, because we're so fallible. It's so easy for us to get discouraged and tripped up and off the track. That is one of the huge purposes of the church. Is we weren't called to walk this path alone. Jesus sets the example when he calls 12 guys to go with him and go along. And none of those apostles were lone rangers. Even Paul, who seemed to kind of have maybe that wiring a bit, was always like bringing people with him. And so like it's a very difficult question of like, well, what do we do in the midst of the culture where we're at? where the culture at large is pretty disconnected, and the church culture, the religious culture, is equally disconnected, if not more. Um, and I don't know what to say. Like, so in our life, what I need to be doing more actively is praying about this, and seeking it out and letting God have that flower open in its time. Um, but I don't think it's good for me to dismiss that. Like I do feel a pull towards, like, I don't want to walk alone. I
Yeah,
want to be a part of a body of other Jesus followers who we may not agree on everything, but where we can encourage each other. Like I text with Aiden and I really enjoy that. Um, and I enjoy the online, conversation here and in various forums. But there is something about the in person
of course.
that's that extra level where we have the time for me to be able to say like what's really going on.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's a weak analogy, but I always use an analogy anyway of chess. It's like I don't play chess online. It's just not the same thing. And
mhm.
if you and I were to sit down and do a face-to-face thing like this and play chess like this, it would be a step closer, but it's infinitely better to actually be in a cafe or in your living room having a tea. It's just like infinitely better.
Yeah.
That might be a slight exaggeration, but not much to say that it's infinitely better, but it's just a lot better. It's a lot, it's a quantum leap. It's
Did I
qualitatively different.
did I ever I think I recommended it, the book Samson and the Pirate Monks.
No.
Okay. You should check it out. Samson and the Pirate Monks. It's a pretty wild story, and it's a real life example of uh brotherly community happening.
Hmm.
Not to give away too much of his story, but the guy that writes it, I mean, he was in a terrible place before this kind of unfolded. So it's very honest.
I'll check it out. Yeah, I'll check it out. Thank you. Before we wrap up here, I don't know if it's appropriate or if you're comfortable with it, but our brother in Christ, Bug, he
Yeah.
took a vow of poverty. It was a private vow. He didn't need to do it. And I found that shocking. It's the first time I've ever heard about this, other than a saint. I've never heard anyone who's not a canonized saint doing this. Um, I'm cautious. I'm very cautious about anything like that. Not just for myself or anyone. Like if you were contemplating that, I'd say just pray on it. Be very careful. Be very, very careful. Wow, because I mean, my first impulse is to say it's pride that would motivate that, that it doesn't come from God, it comes from the other place. But I'm certainly not judging Bug. I'm not. I'm just throwing out there my predisposition on those sorts of things. What was your impression? I mean, there's obviously it's inspirational. It's amazing to think about it. I'm just emphasizing now my gut reaction, which is to be very cautious, to err on the side of caution. What was your first impression when you heard that?
So I think that's wise to have that caution. Perhaps the only thing more dangerous than just outright sin is self righteousness, so that definitely could be a danger.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a part of me that doesn't want to consider those difficult or uncomfortable teachings that might use that, well, I'll be self-righteous, so then I just won't do it. That's, but my wife would probably have a lot of good wisdom for my kind of like,
Rationalizations.
yeah, well, or wanting to do it.
Oh, I
There's
see.
a part of me that wants
Ah,
that thinks I can prove something by doing that.
uh-huh.
That it's less of a letting go and more of a like, okay, I need to really prove something to God by giving
It's my
up
project. Yeah,
everything.
it's my project.
But I think it should be more common in the Christian world. Like I said, the Bruderhof people, they're not part of any specific like religious order. But if you want to join their church group, that's the door in, is you give up everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very interesting. Um, Before we wrap up here, I'm just wondering, I've had probably 300 guests on my show. You've listened to probably a dozen or more of my interviews, right?
Yeah,
Um,
more.
I'm just wondering, apart from the friendship, apart from the prayer and the union of prayer, apart from, the enrollment in perpetual masses and whatever you think about that, and apart from pure entertainment, like I laughed and I cried and whatever, what is the takeaway when you listen to someone tell their story? What are you looking for, and what have you been surprised to have valued from hearing people's stories and their faith journeys and their philosophies?
Um, well, it's valuable to me to hear other perspectives. And too often we just get really combative. So this has been one of the valuable things about me listening in on LDS or Mormon
Right.
conversations on forums, or talking to them and actually hearing what they experience and go through. It does help me to give more like sympathy and consideration for other people. But then there's also an element, and I think this is where the kind of the hidden value of fellowship is. If you tell me that you're going through just a really crappy, hard time, that's like a low point in your life, that I might actually encourage me, because you might not know it. I may be going through a similar thing,
Mm.
and not feeling alone in that is
Okay.
provides hope. You know,
Okay.
it's kind of a weird thing
Uh-huh.
to realize that you're not alone, that you're not, the rest of the world's kind of up here, and you're just kind of like down here in some pit alone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good point. When I listen to Christian radio, and sadly, I mean, from my perspective, sadly, it's mostly 100% Protestant, non-Catholic. Um, the thing that always touches me and often brings me to tears, there's a little bit of tears, which I welcome and I love, and I want more. I want more tears, but what touches me is self-sacrificial love. It's like the mother who takes care of this sick child, and the 8 doctors told her the child will never live, but she took it home and cared for it. And I can't remember if the child lived or died. I think the child lived in this one story I heard recently. But that's not the main point. The main point to me is that this Christian woman, taking care of this vulnerable child. And yeah, okay, you could be cynical. You say, well, it was her child and she's attached to it, and their hormones and millions of years of evolution caused this and that and blah blah. It's like, well, I discard all that anyway. But apart from all the cynical analysis that you could bring to bear on a mother loving their child, sad to say, it's beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful, especially when the child is vulnerable or sick or whatever. And there are many many stories on Christian radio about people making sacrifice, paying a big price, to follow Christ or to love someone or help someone or whatever. It's like that's something we haven't really touched on, although it's in the back, always in the background, always as as Christians. That's the money shot or whatever. you know.
Right. Well, and that's again part of like, if we're in community, that's even more powerful. Like
Yeah,
if God does some work in David's life, let's say
yeah,
we're in community, if God does some work in David's life and David goes along with it, and it's this crazy thing, and I'm like, whoa, it's much different like when I read about it or hear about
uh,
it,
uh,
versus like it's the dude I know, you know,
uh.
that's pretty wild.
Okay. So again, it's the proximity, it's the intimacy, the interconnectedness, and that organic flow of the juices through the body. The juices got to flow through the body. We
Right.
got
And I haven't experienced that tons, because my experiences with that type of community have been so limited, for such a short amount of time.
Yeah, well, it's a very good point you make. It's a very good point you make that it's like, yeah, I can get a tear in my eye listening to some American Christian tell her story on the radio at 500 kilometers away or whatever. And it might have been recorded 10 years ago. I'm just listening to a rebroadcast of it. It's like space and time. It's like whatever. Um, but yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Like, I mean, that's sad. That's really sad to think about it. It's like my soul is thirsty for sacrificial Christ-like love, and I just get I'm lucky if once a month I get a little tiny anecdote on the radio.
Yeah.
Oh, how impoverished are we? How
Very.
impoverished are we? It's embarrassing. It's so
Yeah.
sad. It's so sad. Tell me, you meet a stranger. Let's say you meet a stranger at a party. Okay, this is a thought experiment we can do. We could try this actually in real life if you ever go to a party. You meet someone and have a nice conversation, and then you just ask them like, um, tell me a touching story that you've heard about self-sacrificial love, and and then sit back and listen. And if it's about their aunt or their brother or their sister or their coworker or whatever, then that's a first class story. If it's some novel they read or something they saw on TV or whatever, that's second or third class story, right?
Yeah.
So it might be interesting. It might be interesting to do a little survey in real life. Like, I mean, I'm kind of joking, but to figure out like, are people for the most part getting these little nuggets from real stuff or from secondhand, third hand stuff? I wonder what the proportions
Well,
are.
yeah, we're all set. We're mostly second and third hand, right? We're a consumeristic society. We learn about relationships through our TV shows. We have our adventures and our movies.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's just kind of how we operate.
Vicarious living.
Yeah.
It's sad. You wonder about the patience of God, how He created us to be happy and fulfilled in Him, and how, as physical creatures on a physical, planet, um, He wants us to be fulfilled and happy and in community and everything balanced and no war, no disease, and it's just like you have to wonder at the patience of God, like He's infinitely happy all the time, so he's happy to sit back and watch the show. Um, but what a show it is, when we think about the what could have been if we hadn't fallen from grace in our first parents, right? Wow, what a stark contrast. What could have been if we hadn't fallen from grace versus what we have. It's so sad.
Well, and
Oh.
the thing is, like, I mean, God is a God of redemption, and He works in the midst of our terrible fallenness and our situation, so it's not like all hope is lost.
No.
I'm reminded of, can I read a little of the
Yeah.
Bible? Okay. I think this applies to what we're talking about. Sometimes it feels like everything's so broken,
Yeah.
and it's just like it feels kind of hopeless. So in Luke 11, where it has the Lord's Prayer, or in the Catholic world, do you more commonly call it the Our Father?
I call it the Lord's Prayer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll read that part, but then what happens afterwards is interesting,
Okay.
which is oftentimes the way it is with the Bible. We're familiar with whatever the little part is, but then the after part is super interesting. So Luke 11, once Jesus was in a certain place praying, and as he finished, one of his disciples came to him and said, "Lord, teach us to pray just as John taught his disciples." Jesus said, "This is how you should pray. Father, may your name be kept holy. May your kingdom come soon. Give us each day the food we need, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. And don't let us yield to temptation." Then, teaching them more about prayer, he used this story. Suppose you went to a friend's house at midnight, wanting to borrow 3 loaves of bread. You said to him, "A friend of mine's just arrived for a visit, and I have nothing for him to eat." And suppose he calls out from his bedroom, "Don't bother me. The door is locked for the night. My family and I are all in bed. I can't help you. But I tell you this, though he won't do it for friendship's sake, if you keep knocking long enough, he will give up and give you whatever you need because of your shameless persistence. And so I tell you, keep on asking, and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking, and you will find. Keep on knocking, and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, everyone who seeks finds, and everyone who knocks the door, and to everyone who knocks, the door will be open. You fathers, if your children ask for a fish, do you give them a snake instead? Or if they ask for an egg, do you give them a scorpion? Of course not. So if you sinful people know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father give the Holy Spirit to those who ask him? And so, like, I'm encouraged by that because oftentimes I think that God's not really willing to give me good things. And I think Jesus is talking about this because he understands where our heads tend to be. You know, like we can pray the prayer, but lurking in the back of the prayer is like, it didn't happen right away. You know, and Jesus is saying, like, come on, pound the door for a while, you know, or maybe God doesn't want to, you know, give me this good thing or give me community, you know, and there's a correction of like, no, like he really does want what's good for you. He wants, you know, what's better for you. And we tend to think like, yeah, he wants me to like shape up and give me the right medicine or whatever, you know, but he's not like a bad father. You know, Jesus is like, he's a better father than you. He's a good father. You know, you're looking at it the wrong way.
Yeah, thank you for reading that to me. That's one of my absolute favorite parts of the New Testament for sure. Always has been since I entered the church in 2009. It's just so beautiful and yeah, I hope it didn't give you the impression that I had lost faith in the goodness of God or anything like that just because of our fall. You know, I'm not, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, I do every day, you know.
Yeah.
That's why I'm reading this is because I read this the other day and it hit me. It's
Yeah.
like, oh man, I think like God doesn't want to do good things for
Yeah.
me, or it didn't happen right away. I give up so quickly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're all in the same boat. Because like I said earlier, like when I was talking about my pride and my judgments and my reason sitting above that, that's like amused at how silly I am. It's the same thing with, my moods or like the feelings that can overcome us with the spiritual walk and the difficulty of it and how we want to be sad or give up hope or whatever. There's a component that's just like, yeah, we're pathetic in a certain, at times we go through pathetic states, and our reason has to always sit above that and not take that too seriously. That's not the whole picture. Like the little depression or disappointment or desolation or dryness. We often talk about that in the Catholic circles about spiritual dryness when it comes to prayer life. You were talking about going through the motions, saying the words. It's a very common thing. So yeah, I my reason sits above and it watches. I'm going through dryness. I'm going through a period of weakness. I'm dancing with the devil. I'm cold and lazy or whatever. Like my reason can sit above that and watch the ups and downs and the ups and downs. And same thing with the good stuff. Like, oh, I had consolation, I had a tear come into my eye at church or whatever. And the reason can sit above that too and say, well, don't get too excited about that, the good stuff either. you know don't get too excited, because there's danger in the lows, there's danger in the highs. Like our safe space is in Christ, right? Our safe space is dying to self. Our safe space is being detached from all that emotional stuff. Although the emotions are good, God created us with emotions, the emotions are good, but they can lead us astray. And more often than not, the emotions will lead us astray, the good times and the bad times. And I think the good times are more dangerous, but that's my hunch.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. Although there's part of me that thinks like if I give my kids something and they get super excited, I'm
That's
actually
good.
as a father,
It's
I'm
good.
happy about
It's
that.
good. It's good. Yeah.
It is good. It is very good.
Because the kids are innocent. That's why.
Yeah.
If I see some old pervert walk into the strip club all depressed and he comes out with a smile on his face, I think that's false joy. Right? I think it's a false joy. But when I see a child receive a good gift, I think it's a genuine, innocent joy. That's the difference. So I I want to be like a child. I want to be innocent. I want to go back and I want to. I don't know what. Like how can I go back? How can There's a song by the Nice. It's a sort of a progressive band from the late 60s, early 70s, and it's a song about going back to childhood, going back to innocence, and it's a very touching, beautiful song, you know. But how can we do that? And that's that's kind of the one of my main goals as a Christian is like, can I unburden myself of the this burden which I've taken upon myself, which was not strictly speaking was not necessary, but certainly understandable in the world, to the context of family and the world and everything else. We live in this fallen world, so I mean, I want to be unburdened, but I don't want to blame myself inordinately for, take on too much responsibility for the burden that I've taken on, or for the woundedness and all these sorts of things. So again, the reason has to sit above always and judge, and to be cautious about going too far one way or the other, denying sinfulness, or being taking on excessive responsibility for the muck and the mire that we're in, you know.
Sure.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up here? Did we cover most of the stuff that you wanted to get to today? You can always come back. Obviously, you're going to come back, but I felt like I wasn't really super focused and clear today, so maybe there was some other bullet points you wanted to hit on briefly before we wrap up, or did we cover it?
No, I'm excited for you to talk to some of the LDS members who, even if I just know them a little bit.
Do you know their faces? Do you know their faces yet?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, most of the people are from a forum, so I don't really know them that well.
There's no avatar with their picture on it that you could recognize them when they come on the show?
Well, some do, and I've asked them, I said, hey, let me know when you're going on. Okay. But Sam, who you already interviewed, is the LDS member who I know the best.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. You'll definitely have they watched you on my podcast, because you've been on here several times? You haven't shared that?
I think they're mostly unfamiliar with the podcast.
Okay.
Some were very enthusiastic to go on, so there's actually a certain fondness or kinship towards Catholicism in some LDS corners.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'm excited about that too. I've joined Podmatch. I joined Podmatch, and I'm getting a lot of people booking. So it's pretty cool. But for that reason, I haven't really been laser focused on each and every booking. So these LDS, I noticed them coming in, but I'm not really paying attention to where they fall on the calendar. But I think it's probably, somewhere in October, because my calendar's been filling up. But it's going to be really exciting, and I'm happy that I have this opportunity. Thanks to you. Thanks once again. And give my love to Julie, as always. And if she ever wants to come back and chat about whatever is going on with her, let her know. She's always welcome. Open invitation.
Yeah, she told me she would love to come on and debate about Pope Vigilius with you sometime.
Seriously?
No.
Yeah, that would be cool. So thank you so much, my brother. God bless you. Please continue to pray for me, because I'm assuming you've been praying for me a little bit at least.
Well, yeah, I'll pray for both of us, because we're not in tight community right now with our family.
Oh, okay.
So I'll pray the same prayer that I pray for you, also for us.
Unity and peace. Unity and peace. The peace. It's funny, because Christ said he brings not peace but a sword that divides, mother against daughter, and all these sorts of things. So there is that aspect to it. But Christ is peace incarnate. So we have to get through the battle, and I guess the reward is being with Christ, and being in Christ, and having Christ in us. But that brings to mind another quote from a saint about. It'll come to me another time. I'll let you know. But yeah, it's been a pleasure talking with you, as always. I hope you come back, and we'll see each other on Twitter.
Sounds good.
God bless you, my brother.
God bless you too.
Love you. Bye-bye.